Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I hope you're all safe and well. Today's webinar is the first of many product launches APPA will be hosting. Today, you are listening and using your computer speaker system by default. You will have the opportunity to submit questions to Ashley by typing them into the questions pane on the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end. To give a brief introduction on today's presenter, Ashley Crawford is passionate about the promo products. He is always striving to bring the latest in promo and marketing ideas from around the globe to his customers in the Australian market. Prior to taking on the role of Head of Sales and Marketing at Promocollection for the past 3 years, Ashley worked in a number of marketing and e-commerce positions globally. I will now hand these over to Ashley.
So firstly, apologies to everyone. The presentation today, it's quite basic, but that just reflects how busy we were last week. I really didn't have time to beautify the presentation. So hopefully everyone can just get the key information out of it. And feel free to send through your questions during the presentation. And I can try and answer a few if you don't want to ask in this forum. I've got my contact details at the end as well, so feel free to drop me a line. So the title of today's presentation is COVID-19. So if you look on any news or turn the TV on, it's everything that anyone's talking about. So a lot of people at the moment are focusing on the negative side for the economy going forwards. But in every times of crisis, there's also opportunities. And so I'm talking about the opportunity for the promo industry. So the contents of today's presentation, so just give a brief summary of the crisis so far. And then when we're looking at the crisis, we need to look at certain elements of the business environment and how that affects us directly. Then looking at each of you as a company, what resources you have, and then talking about the opportunity during this time of crisis. Finally, I'll be sharing some very high-level information just from the TGA, the Therapeutical Goods Association, just with regards to the products that I'll be mentioning, just some things that we need to be careful of. And at the end, we'll have time for some questions. So the crisis, I mean, there's no need to go into great detail, but we know unprecedented in the last 100 years, spreading around the world. The case numbers in the top left-hand corner, I think I put them last Friday. I'm not sure what they are today, but they're rapidly increasing. So when we look at the crisis, it's important to look at specifically as companies in the promotions industry, how the different elements affect us. So a lot of countries have gone into lockdown. So a lot of parts of Europe where it's very serious, the US, Asia, and as of last Wednesday, I think it was, New Zealand's in lockdown for 4 weeks. Australian states closing their borders. So New South Wales and Victoria haven't, but to my knowledge, most other states are closing borders to majority of traffic. The industries, so the government is talking about essential industries and non-essential industries. So they've listed the industries that will stay open regardless, and all others will be gradually closing. So the one thing I wanted to mention when looking at the essential industries is freight and logistics. So around the world, even in some of the worst affected areas, such as Italy, freight and logistics still are operating because people need to eat, medical supplies need to go around. So when we look at the supply situation at the moment, excuse me, as a company, Promocollection, we do our sourcing from China. So 2 months ago, when the virus first had its outbreak in China, our big worry was we wouldn't be able to supply anything. Excuse me. We wouldn't be able to supply anything to the market in Australia. But demand was as strong as ever 2 months ago. Now that situation has flipped 180 degrees. So we have the supply situation in China roughly coming back to previous capacity. And also you see production shifting towards virus control related products. Also looking at the logistics side of things, if we first look at the international side, so we bring in things via sea and air every day of the week. Sea freight, the main effect has been that there's a requirement that ships need to be at sea for 14 days. So that hasn't significantly drawn out our lead times in that coming from China, it takes around 12 days anyway, so it's only a few extra days. The air side has probably been the largest change in the last few weeks, and this is due to commercial airlines ceasing a lot of their international operations, and that's reduced capacity to bring in freight via air. So it is gradually recovering, but there are additional delays to what traditionally air freight times from China. In terms of domestic, there has been some decrease in air freight and also land freight. It can still operate through the borders, even to the states that are closed, but there will be additional delays with that. So that's looking at the supply side. So on the demand side, the virus has sort of two elements. So for most of the traditional work that the promo industry does, it's had a significant drastic effect tied to the government's social distancing measures. So trade shows, marketing events, sports events, all those sort of things. University recruitment, universities have gone online for the time being. So it's a lot of businesses who just focus on that will probably have a very quiet 2 or 3 months ahead. But at the same time, it has created shortages in the economy. So food products, we've seen the supermarkets running out of certain food products, but also for protective equipment, which I'll talk about in a minute, and also medical supplies. So when we look at the analysis I just gave of the environment, and we look at each of you listening to this webinar today, what resources do you still have? So for the companies that are operating remotely and still online, you'll have your staff, so the different departments there. You'll also have the customer base that you've been dealing with over a long period of time. So you have those relationships, you'll have those contacts, and they'll also have the habit of coming to you when they need things, even if it's outside the traditional space of promotional products. And you've also got your well-established communication channels, so your website, social media, EDMs, etc. So in quick summary, looking at the current environment, the promotional side of the industry will take a significant hit for the short term. Logistics operating at lower capacity, but still operating. You've still got staff that you need to be able to pay and give them things to do to generate income. And the risk is if they're just doing traditional promo, they'll be sitting quite idle. You've still got the clients in those relationships, and there's also an increase in need for PPE, so personal protective equipment. So that brings me on to the opportunity at the moment. So anyone who's in the industry has probably been inundated with requests for personal protective equipment and different products slightly. So in the next few slides, I'll just go through some of the main categories and some points to consider while selling at this time. So something I wanted to emphasize going back to this slide here is distributors in the promotional industry, they probably traditionally see themselves as sources of promotional products, but our experience in the last few weeks is that customers from all over the country also see them as a channel to source things when they're scarce in the market. So as an industry, if we want to continue to survive during this downturn, I think we need to broaden our thinking in terms of what we can provide to our customers. Okay, so the one that everyone's been flooded with inquiries for is hand sanitizers. So you have the gel and you also have the wipes. So something to look for is the ethyl alcohol content in terms of killing germs. One thing, and I'll go over this at the end of the presentation as well, is not to make any claims about being able to, but besides being able to kill germs, don't make any claims about being able to prevent or cure any illnesses because they aren't tested to be able to do that. The next category is the PPE, so personal protective equipment. So goggles, face shields, the masks, gowns, gloves, shoe covers, all these sorts of products. So these products, just from our experience in the last week, we've sold a significant quantity of hand sanitizer, but at the same time, we've also sold probably 2 or 3 times that amount of masks. So masks are something that's probably been a bit underestimated in the market at the moment. So that's something worth considering to communicating to your clients about, that you have that sourcing capability. So with the masks, there's a few things to keep in mind. Probably half the inquiries we get are clients saying they want P2 masks. So it's been a bit of a steep learning curve, I'm sure, for most in the industry who've never had to deal with these standards for personal protective equipment. So that's something that we've been researching as we've been setting up our sourcing relationships in the last few weeks. So with the P2, it's a standard, and there are other equivalent standards for different countries. So in China, it's the KN95, US, the N95. So it refers to the filtration ability of the masks. So the FFP rating. So when they say P2, it's overseas it's called FFP2. So the filter, so it should be a face filter piece. So that's the rating about the size of the molecules that can go through the mask product. So at the top we have a general mask category. Then we have P2, which is a higher grade, and I'll talk a bit more about the different grades of masks in the next slide here. And then we have the medical use masks. So something important here for the medical use masks, if clients who are healthcare operators come to you looking to source masks, you need to be able to supply a product that is TGA certified. So the Therapeutical Goods Association certification, and it has to meet the standards for medical goods in healthcare. So that's something that as an industry we need to be aware of and be careful of, that we're not supplying the wrong product to our healthcare professionals at this time. So in terms of the different levels of protection, so this was, I got off the 3M website. I mean, you can have a look at this online. The FFP 1, 2, and 3. So the P2 that a lot of people are asking for is the P2. So it just talks about the different levels of filtration that it can provide. So the highest level is okay for people in healthcare. Thermometers are another category. So the ones we've been pushing are the non-contact thermometer, and in this time of social distancing, that's probably a lot more recommended product than the in-ear version, because you can maintain your distance from the target. So in terms of how to market these products, I'm sure a lot of you are just getting the inquiries for hand sanitizer or masks. But I know my wife, who works for a large corporation, also a lot of other friends who are working from home, if companies were able to send out packs, something like a wellness pack of these different products that are hard to come by at the moment, I think that's a really good way to let employees feel like the company's looking after them. Also, if companies were able to send these out to their key clients, I think it's a very useful product at this time, and it's a good way to communicate how you value that customer. So we do have some of these packs on our website. So that's just something you can think about, combining multiple products. We can provide these zip-locked bags as well. Excuse me. Okay. So in terms of product claims, a lot of people are rushing out to use the word, so there's good protection or cure, other keywords, and in normal times, it's probably people use that language quite loosely, but when it comes to medical related products, we need to be quite careful as an industry that we're not using the wrong wording, because you can potentially get into trouble with government departments, such as the TGA. So with hand sanitizers, you don't require the TGA certification if they're just for general use. And the maximum amount of claims you can make is that they kill 99% of germs. You don't want to be talking about kill viruses or prevent viruses or anything like that. Because to be able to make those claims, you'd need some sort of clinical tests to be recognised and then apply for the relevant TGA approvals. So in terms of, if, as mentioned with the mask up ahead, the previous slide, if you're planning on providing products to medical institutions, they need to have TGA approval. And they obviously need to meet the required standard. So something we need to be careful of is providing not standard products that don't reach the standard to medical institutions, because there could be potentially be a legal risk in there for clients. So this presentation will be shared afterwards, but I'll put a link there into the TGA website with regards to hand sanitizers. Okay, so that's all I had to talk about today. Again, apologies. It was quite a simple presentation, but we were just so busy last week and we just flat out. So unfortunately, I didn't have time to beautify the presentation. So I've got my information up there. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to drop me a line. Also, our website and our other channels there. So that's all I had. I'll just pass over to Ida now if there was any questions from the audience.
Thank you, Ashley, for that fantastic presentation. Now, at the moment, it doesn't look like we have any questions. However, if any other questions come to mind after the presentation for Ashley, as is mentioned, you can send them directly to Ashley at promocollection.com.au. Now, tomorrow you'll receive a follow-up email with a link to view the recording of today's presentation and a link to view the slides. So on behalf of Ashley and APPA, thank you for joining us today and have a great afternoon.
Yeah, thanks.